Welcome to the Support Raising Solutions podcast, where we help new and current ministry workers grow in being spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded Great Commission workers. Welcome to the SRS podcast. This is your host today, Callie Davis, and I'm very excited to be joined by Dr. George Kenworthy. Hi, George.
Hi, Callie. It's a privilege to be with you today.
Well, it is a privilege to have you. George comes to us with a career of 32 years being a senior pastor in various churches, as well as an extensive teaching and preaching history, including Trinity University, Denver Seminary, Phoenix Seminary, Bethel Seminary, Fuller Theological Seminary. But it doesn't end there. In 2006, he left the role of being a pastor to become the founder and president of Hope for the Hurting Home. And that's when you stepped into kind of the support raising world. And there's a personal connection to you. I am so excited to chat with you because George is the father of one of our staff members, Kathy Wilson, who is our coaching specialist. So I am so excited for the personal connection, as well as you bring such a rich wealth of just experience, knowledge, and expertise. So here we are to talk about gratitude, and not just gratitude from what we hope is partners and giving partners, but gratitude from ourselves as missionaries. If you missed it, George wrote an article about the same topic. So go ahead. We hope you check that out on the SRS blog, but we want to chat about it today. So George, I'll kick it over to you. One of the main points of your article as I was reading through it was cultivating a heart of gratitude. And that kind of is where everything else kind of rippled or dominoed from. Can you unpack a little bit, what does it mean to have a heart of gratitude and how do we go about cultivating it?
Well, having a heart of gratitude as a Christian starts with our relationship with Jesus Christ, because we live in a grace period within the church. People talk about grace all the time, but I often wonder, do we understand grace? Because grace, simply translated, is being so overwhelmed with what Jesus Christ did for me on the cross that I am so full of gratitude. My life permeates joy and excitement. And so in this day and age where so many people are depressed and suicidal and whatever else, having a heart of gratitude shows I know who Jesus is in my life, and it's impacted me in everything that I do. So that's the beginning point with me.
Okay. Well, I would say that makes sense. It'd probably be easy for anyone to agree with that, but how do we go from that's a nice, true statement to I live and breathe that?
Well, I think the way we do that is, we commit ourselves to God's word. It's a practical tool that I use, my most important tool. Call it a stop think card. Okay. It's based on Philippians 4-7. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your forbearing spirit be known to all men, and so on. And then we're told that if we do this, the surpassing peace of God we're going to have. And then as you go on in verses 8 and 9 in that text, it tells us, and how do you get that? Which is the answer to your question. And here's how you get it. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, let your mind dwell on these things, and the peace of God will be with you. And so as you apply this to support raising or anything else, if you're dwelling on the negative, I can't do it. Why aren't people supporting? What's going on? And this is so hard. You do that and you're not going to have joy, and you're not going to be reflecting gratitude. You flip it around and you say, I'm going to focus on the positive. I'm excited about the call of God in my life. I'm excited about this opportunity that's before me. I'm excited about what God is going to be able to do for me in the future, because it's about him and it's not about me. Well, then you've got gratitude in your heart for the opportunity for you. And as you tell your story, it's going to come through as you talk to your supporters.
Oh, absolutely. I'm hearing you talk about just it's worthwhile to dwell on the things we are grateful for. Absolutely. And that's something I've read from multiple Christian authors, as well as in the psychology world. The idea that being grateful and thankful actually creates brain neural pathways that helps us have positive thinking. It helps us avoid depression. It by no means is the only cure all, but it is literally making a difference in our brain chemistry and function. It's not just the power of positive thinking. And it's something that I think takes effort, takes intentionality. It doesn't just happen. So you mentioned the stop think card. I'm wondering, as we're specifically talking to people on support who raise support, what are ways they can be intentionally grateful when it comes to their ministry partners, when it comes to their ministry? How can we focus on that area? What can that look like?
Well, in my article, I talk about my thought that there are four kinds of donors. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
anybody would agree with that, but what I call the mercy donor, the person who is going to give you a little bit and they'll give somebody else a little bit. They're not really terribly excited about your ministry, but they got plenty of money and here's $20 for you. Sure. And then you have the loyalty donors, which is family members and friends, and they may not even really care about the ministry that you do, but you're a family member and you're going to the mission field, you ask them for support, and they're gonna do that. Mm-hmm. And then there are the cause donors who believe in the cause, and you can say for all your donors, but especially for them, they need to know that there's a cause that I'm doing something worthwhile that I'm excited about. I feel called to, and I believe God is going to do some exciting things for me in that. And then why they matter, these donors, is not just they're going to give me money for that. They're going to be praying for me. They're going to be excited for me. They're going to be part of the team. I'm going to bounce ideas off from them on where we're headed, things we want to do. So they are a valued part of the team, and I appreciate that. And I know I can't do it without them. And I can just add as a footnote, years ago, I read a book by J.B. Phillips entitled Your God is Too Small. And my conviction is that for a lot of us, our God is too small. And as it relates to the support raising area, I think it's true here too. That if our God is big enough, call us to something that's exciting, and it's about him doing it, not me doing it, then I can pass on that excitement and enthusiasm to my folks and then realize I'm not going to make it without their help. I'm desperate for their prayer support. I'm desperate for their encouragement. I'm desperate for them to pray for me when I hit the wall. Because the truth of the matter is, no matter who you are, what ministry you're in, there's going to be points where you're going to say, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And especially when it comes to support raising, it's hard raising support. I mean, I know that. I've had to raise support for me, and then now I raise support for our entire team. So it's hard. Nobody else on my team wants to go raise support, by the way. They're happy to have me be the one to do that. And it's a privilege because it's part of what we need to do to extend the ministry.
Yeah. So you kind of categorize four different types of reasons that people give, four different types of donors. I think I've seen it as kind of a spectrum of, I want people on the one end where they are totally invested, they are bought in, they get the why of why I care about this, the why of what God is doing, the lives he is changing. They're the ones that are excited. They're the ones that are excited about what I'm doing, whether they're giving or whether they just don't have the capacity. Either way, they are all bought in. And then you have the spectrum that goes the other direction for all the different various reasons. They really like me, which you talk about, just the loyalty down to the, they said yes because I asked, and no real care beyond that. Do you see that you can move someone through that line, down that line, from not really invested to they start to get it more and more, and they start to get more excited?
Well, and the answer is yes, and then the next question is going to be, and exactly how do we do that?
Yes,
and the follow-up of how we do that is with the stories. I call them God stories. Stories of something that God did that you can't do. And I need to be clear on this. It can be most frustrating for the missionary group as a whole when we talk about, we want to hear your miracle stories. Well, the truth of the matter, there aren't any miracles that happen for any of us. Some of us never really ever see a miracle. I can say in my life, I've had 3 or 4 times where God answered prayers in what many would consider miraculous ways. Most of the rest of the time, it's God answering prayer. Richard Foster wrote a book, on prayer, and he has a chapter on praying the ordinary that gets to the point I'm laboring to make here. And he said, until you can pray the ordinary, that is the daily prayer, God, show up in my life today. God, help me to experience you today. You're not going to see anything extraordinary happen. And that's what I'm talking about. Do I have stories of experiencing the presence of God today? We should be able to say that every day. We should be able to say that God is answering my prayers in meaningful ways every day. And that's what I'm talking about, that we share those stories of God showing up in our life, in our ministry, through our prayers, even as we're reading the word. For me, one of the most significant thing is I'm in Bible study and I'm asking God to speak to me. He does. And then if you if as a preacher like me, can share from the pulpit what God said to you, it resonates with people because it's something God impressed upon you. So that's what I'm talking about. Share your experiences that are God experiences with our people. That's what's going to excite them.
Yeah. Well, and I really resonate with the people that I've worked with and interacted with that have been in the ministry field for decades. And they turn to me and say, Callie, there's nothing more to say. Like, I love my job. I show up here, but I've said everything. I've shared everything. Like there's nothing to write in a newsletter. And I see that chain reaction of their partners start to kind of feel like nothing's really happening in ministry because the worker likes what they're doing, doesn't want to leave, but they've lost that vision of what God is doing. And I got to sit with them and say, I'm pretty sure God is still at work. Yes. I'm pretty sure he is still doing things. And maybe it's not the flashy, you just had someone completely come to Christ as you were sitting there. But are you looking for what God is doing? And can you share those moments? Because if you don't see them, you sure can't share them. And starting to see kind of their eyes kind of brighten up a little bit. Like, you're right. God is doing something. I want to be looking about it. I want to be sharing about it. And it ripples down the chain of, if you are seeing God, you can share about God. If you are being passionate to see what God is doing, you can generate that excitement and that passion in your partners as well.
Yeah. And as I said, this whole thing is a fundamental biblical principle. We're told in John 14-16 about the role of the Holy Spirit in our lives, and he teaches us truth. And so the reality is, as we're in the Word, we should have a sense that the Spirit of God is showing us things we've never seen before. We should have plenty of aha moments when a pastor is teaching, or women's Bible study leader is teaching, or as we're preparing to teach, where we feel God just spoke to me, because the Bible tells us he does that. But if on a week-by-week basis, I can't say, I experienced God in my prayer life, I experienced God when I read the Word, the Spirit of God wasn't really doing anything, well, then it means something's wrong with your walk with Jesus, because that should be an expectation that we're going to see God communicating his truth to us in one way or another, and we're going to be able to experience, as I said, maybe not the Red Sea parting as we're ready to cross. I mean, I've seen a few of those kind of experiences that were pretty fabulous, but you can still say, I saw God answer prayers. I saw him move circumstances. Maybe it's not going to be the kind of thing that's going to, impress the world as a miracle. But we know that as we pray, God affects things, and that's what we share, what God has been doing in our lives. So, yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to pull us back a little bit. I feel like we got a little sidetracked because
we did.
I love talking about what God is doing, but I think what is a really interesting thought of where you went with your article and where your thought is of, we would love partners to be excited to be givers. We would love for them to totally get that. But so much of their excitement and their cheerfulness and giving that we really hope happens comes from first our expression of what God is doing, of that vision, the idea of, are we communicating that passion, that excitement? Because otherwise they have nothing to be excited about if we don't first start that.
Well, and as part, when you can say some of the hardest people to raise support are people that are in the office. So if you're the office accountant, you can say, well, what's my story? Well, you're an incredible part of a team, and whatever the mission is, if you're, the team is leading people to Christ, they're doing, some sort of humanitarian kind of work, you're part of that team, and you're invaluable to that team. The team couldn't do what they do without that accountant. And so the accountant is not saying, well, let me tell you the glories of, adding, 6 and 5 and multiplying by this and keeping the books. Their story is the team's story. And they just need to see themselves as I am part of this. We couldn't see
Right.
these people come to Christ without me doing it. So I think some of it is we need to go back to uh, Romans 12 and First Corinthians about the body, and that every part of the body is necessary to function. And then for those of us who say, "But I'm not the preacher," well, yeah, we're
Mm-hmm.
not all preachers. I mean, read what the Bible says. But
Right.
every one of us is critically important, and sometimes it's just getting that through our heads and heart how important we are to the overall world ministry. And then we got a story to tell. It's the story of the mission. That's our story.
Mm. That is so powerful to make sure that you see the value of the work you do. And even if that feels small, to be able to see how important and vital it is in that chain reaction that leads to the person on the field being that discipler, being that evangelist. If you view your work as small, first of all, I feel like God didn't call you to small work. He called you because it was important. But if you view it as small, you're going to talk about it in small ways. And then that's going to be a small thing to your partners. And they're going to miss what God is doing. They're going to miss that God saw this as important work. So let's not shrink God's calling and God's vision. Let's talk about it in much bigger and more broader perspective. Is there maybe one more final thought you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, first of all, I do sympathize, empathize with anybody who is struggling raising support. I left the pastorate, and the church that I served asked me as a favor to them not to try raising support until October. And I started my new job in January. So I had 3 months to raise all of my support. I was a global evangelist with a denomination. That was my job. And so I had to raise support for many flights overseas to a variety of different places, plus my basic ministry support, plus, family support. So it was a pretty significant amount of money I had to raise. And in the process of all that, I found myself frustrated. I found myself getting depressed. It's like, oh, this is too hard. I went from plan A to plan B to plan C to plan D. When I finally hit the F plan, someone said, "So, George, you finally made it to the faith plan, have you?" And I said, "Well, no, I've got the godly plan left and the heavenly plan, the inspirational plan, the kingdom." Because I felt desperate to keep coming up with a new plan because whatever plan I was doing wasn't working fast enough for me. And in the process of all that, I think what I need to know, I mean, it's good having all these plans. I can give some tips on plans that I find that work better than some traditional ones. But the takeaway lesson in all of this is in my sense of desperation, because God indeed had called me to this new ministry that I had. In 3 months, God raised all the support that we needed. We were fully supported in 3 months. So I don't know if that discourages your listeners or encourages your listeners, but I can say I know the discouragement that raising money has. I know how hard it can be, but I also know if God has called you, He can supply the means, and He sure has done that for us, and He continues to do that for us.
Well, and I think something I heard as I was hearing some of your story before we started recording was the big vision, that you dreamed big, and you didn't shrink that vision to fit your time constraints. You saw what God wanted to do, and it included your family. It included the invitations and the opportunities everywhere. And often I see people saying, well, it won't be possible to meet that goal in this timeline, so I'll shrink the goal. I'll shrink the vision is what it ends up being. But instead, you were desperate to hold on to that vision. I think that speaks very highly of you.
And you asked for one more thing. I'll give you one more thing on top of the one more thing.
All right.
Secret, quoting Steve Shadwack, was I wasn't afraid to ask anybody, anywhere, anytime for support. And I kept thinking more creative ways to ask. So I'd ask one way, and then I'd ask another way, and ask another way. But, I knew that, come January, my job started and I need to be ready. So I went and asked boldly, and I found God honoring that and giving me literally tens of $1,000s at a time, because that's what I asked for When I'd go, people ask for
Wow.
$10,000 for a 3-month period or for a 3-year period of time. So $10,000, 3 years in a row, at least maybe 3 to 5. And several people said yes to that ask. So I know any of your supporters would say, man, if I could get about 5 people to give $10,000 a year for 5 years, that would help me over, the hump. But the key takeaway is I asked, and I was amazed at how people responded.
Absolutely. And wow, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your work. And thank you for your time today. It has been a privilege and an honor to chat with you. And I hope our listeners have been encouraged and maybe got a little more vision for sharing vision with their partners. Okay. So listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful Christmas season and enjoy this little kind of stint we've been doing talking about thankfulness and gratitude at the end of 2022. So take care and we'll catch you again sometime. Thanks for joining us today, and please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode as we work to give more insight into building and maintaining your ministry partnership team.